Switzerland is one of the most beautiful places on the planet. However, that isn't the only great thing about this country. Even though it does not have a strong army, invaders would still have a hard time beating Switzerland. In 1815, Switzerland's neutrality was guaranteed by the Treaty of Paris. It has not fought in armed conflicts since then. Other than that, there was one civil war. In 1847, a civil war led to the formation of a federal state with a constitution. This established Switzerland as a federal state. A policy of armed neutrality was maintained during the World Wars, although bordering countries were involved in the conflicts. Switzerland joined the United Nations only in 2002 and has continued its neutral policies. Here are some of the reasons it is almost impossible to invade Switzerland. Switzerland has a mountainous terrain, which would make it a very difficult place for an invasion. Around 70% of the country's area has a mountainous terrain, out of which 58% is covered by the Swiss Alps. Airdrops or moving heavy armor through the mountains is extremely challenging, if not impossible, whereas the rocky landscape would provide ample concealment for Swiss troops and artillery. The cold, snowy conditions at higher altitudes add to the difficulties of invading through Switzerland's mountains. Troops must contend with altitude sickness, hypothermia, and harsh environments, something Swiss forces are well acclimated to. Switzerland can leverage its knowledge of the terrain for rapid guerrilla-style counterattacks on enemies constrained to a few vulnerable valleys and passes. Withdrawal and retreat into the mountains are an easy option for Swiss defenders. Switzerland has powerful neighbors with whom it shares good economic and political relationships. Switzerland is a landlocked country, so if any country wanted to invade Switzerland, it would first have to go through its powerful neighbors like Germany, France, Italy, Austria, and Liechtenstein. Militarily, Liechtenstein is the weakest of the five neighbors, and even if the invaders somehow beat Liechtenstein and reached Switzerland, it would still have to face the risk of getting attacked by Germany or France, who wouldn't want such unrest in their region. Even though Switzerland does not spend as much on its military as several of its neighbors, it does not mean that it can't defend its country when the time comes. In Switzerland, it is mandatory for all able-bodied men to serve in the military, whereas military service is voluntary for women. This means that all able-bodied men in the country have the right training to defend their country during a war. The entire male population of the country can be called up as reservists if the need be. For any invading army, facing resistance from hundreds of thousands of trained reservists with unwavering motivation to defend their homeland and surroundings they expertly navigate would cause relentless chaos, sap morale, massively delay advancement through narrow terrain, and severely undermine combat effectiveness. The prospect serves as an immense deterrent. In essence, mandatory conscription ensures Switzerland has a highly ready force in being, available to instantaneously transition from peace to war. One important lesson from history would tell you just how difficult it is for other countries to invade Switzerland. Back during the Second World War, the Germans tried to conquer the entire Europe. They invaded countries like France and the Netherlands and even marched towards the powerful Soviet Union. So if the Germans were so powerful that they could take on entire Europe all by themselves, why didn't they invade Switzerland? Well, because of the mountainous terrain and also because the country built a strong and extensive network of fortifications to protect itself from a German invasion. Even the Germans understood that what the Swiss had developed was an effective and powerful defense. To this day, Switzerland has an extensive network of underground bunkers, fortifications, and fortresses. Some of these bunkers can protect against nuclear and biological attacks. You might have heard the phrase, "live and let live." This is true for Switzerland. The country does not like to get involved in wars. Throughout history, Switzerland has cultivated a reputation as a neutral and peaceful nation, avoiding involvement in conflicts and wars. This dates back centuries, with the country not having been in a state of war since 1815. Switzerland's neutrality is ingrained in its national identity and foreign policy. Any unprovoked attack on a peaceful country like Switzerland would be seen as an act of heinous aggression by the global community. Attempting to invade Switzerland would gain nothing for the aggressor except condemnation from other countries. Even the public of the invading country might not like the decision as well. This might result in sanctions on the invader, or they might even have to face another military conflict by countries looking to protect the peaceful nation of Switzerland. Switzerland also has the honor of sending guards to the Vatican City. There are around 135 young Swiss guards in the Vatican City who are always ready to guard and protect the Pope. So any attack on Switzerland might not be received well by the Pope, which means that the attack on Switzerland might get a blowback from over 1 billion people of the Catholic faith. Another thing that may force the invaders to fight a war on two fronts is the fact that Switzerland is a major player in the global financial system. Any attack on Switzerland will result in the global financial system taking a bad hit. Switzerland has a very prosperous economy and banking sector. Invading it would destabilize international financial systems, which decentivizes attacks from foreign powers. An invasion would ignite chain reactions of economic turmoil worldwide, likely rivaling the global financial crisis. No nation can afford blowback of that scale, especially over little strategic gain from Swiss territory itself. In essence, Switzerland's interdependencies make it an economic sanctuary too important to global commerce. In addition to its being an important player in the global financial system, powerful people from all over the world keep their black money in Swiss banks, as it has a traditional secrecy law in banking. This makes it easy for people to hide their black money in Swiss banks. These people would want to protect their money at all costs. Powerful people from all over the world have their accounts in Swiss banks, which means that if a ruler tries to invade Switzerland, then they will face criticism and resistance from the powerful people in their own country. So, for example, if any country's military general wants to invade Switzerland, but the president has black money in Swiss banks, the president would try their best to call off the invasion. Entry points into Switzerland are bottlenecked by lakes, rivers, and mountains, which allows the military to more easily block routes an invading army could take. There are only a couple of major highways and railroad routes connecting Switzerland with Italy due to the steep mountains. Tunnels through those mountains would be hard to capture and easy for Swiss defensive forces to rig with explosives. Mountain passes pose a similar challenge. There are just a handful of passes wide and accessible enough to transport heavy equipment like tanks and artillery over. The few feasible entry points create natural choke points. This allows the Swiss military to concentrate its defensive efforts and weaponry on these locations. Even a much smaller defense force can block and hold a choke point for a while against a larger attacker. Rigging choke points and their surroundings with artillery, anti-tank weapons, barricades, and explosives allows Switzerland to effectively blunt an invading force. The lakes in Geneva create additional barriers. Building transport boats or bridges across water bodies takes time, and Swiss defenders could target any makeshift river or lake crossings. Forested areas also limit the off-road mobility of any invading army. Overall, Switzerland would force any invader to column through a very limited set of entry points favorable for Swiss defenders. Switzerland cannot be invaded due to its indispensable role as host to a vast network of pivotal United Nations operations that facilitate critical international cooperation and global governance. Headquartered on Swiss territory are over 25 major UN bodies, over 150 permanent missions, the WHO, WTO, UNHCR, and other agencies managing vital policy domains including refugee welfare, economics, labor rights, and telecommunications standards. Switzerland also provides vital impartial land to UN-backed international courts adjudicating crimes against humanity. As the neutral host country providing security, infrastructure, and good offices for this expansive UN infrastructure handling profoundly consequential global issues, Switzerland suffers no aggressor nations willing to risk the major international backlash and breakdown of worldwide governance inevitably triggered by any armed assault on this small but enormously globally important country. Switzerland is not part of the European Union or NATO, however, the war in Ukraine has brought Switzerland even closer to NATO countries. If the country is threatened, then it might think about finally ditching the neutrality status and joining NATO. If Switzerland joins NATO, it can entirely change the political and military dynamics of the country and the world. NATO has a policy of joint defense, so if any of the NATO members are attacked, all other NATO members are bound to protect the country that is attacked. So Switzerland will have the support of powerful countries like the United States, which is a great deterrent in itself. When countries know that a military superpower like the United States is protecting them, no one would want to invade you without the risk of going against the USA and other NATO members. There is little strategic, political, or economic incentive for a foreign power to invade Switzerland. As a neutral country, Switzerland poses no direct military threat to its neighbors or anyone in the world. In fact, they have always been on the good side of every country. Switzerland also has a very stable and prosperous society, with a strong rule of law. Attempting to occupy Swiss cities and villages with complex underground bunkers would tie down tens of thousands of troops. There are no significant natural resources to exploit either. Essentially, the costs and difficulties of invading Switzerland massively outweigh any potential benefits. Switzerland's combination of mountainous terrain, defenses, and lack of strategic incentives make it an extremely difficult, if not impossible, country to successfully invade and occupy. In 2022, Russia launched a full-scale attack on Ukraine, which has already resulted in the death of thousands of people from both sides. The Russian attack received condemnation from all over the world. Many countries considered it to be an unwarranted attack, so much so that even Switzerland's neutrality was tested after this war. Switzerland's government was compelled to rethink its neutrality stance, and for the first time in over 100 years, it showed support towards one side in an armed conflict when it supported Ukraine. It has also taken in Ukraine refugees, where the refugees can work and earn money. Switzerland has also allocated around $2 billion in humanitarian aid to Ukraine. However, Switzerland is still maintaining its neutrality to some extent, as they have refrained from sending military aid to Ukraine like most of its other European counterparts. The funds that Switzerland has sent will only be used for humanitarian purposes and the development of infrastructure. These are some of the reasons that it is almost impossible for countries to invade Switzerland. In addition to the invasion being difficult, it just doesn't make any sense to invade a country that has been peaceful for over 150 years.